Now, we've had this Royal Enfield Classic 650 for a couple of weeks now, and in this video I want to convey what this motorcycle is like to live with. Now, in that time that we've had this bike, we've ridden it in all kinds of roads, whether it's beautiful country lanes that lead to wonderful places like this. This is Rutland Water, it's a beautiful location. Whether it's dual carriageways, motorways, busy roads, we've ridden on all of them, towns, cities, you name it. So I really do have a good understanding of what this motorcycle is like to live with on a daily basis. And with this being a new bike, that might be something that you're interested to hear, and it's very shortly coming out to be fully released in India as well. So I'm sure you'll be interested to find out what this bike is like.
Now, if you're like us and you want a motorcycle to be very stylish, then you're going to absolutely love the Royal Enfield Classic 650 because it is extremely stylish. Every part of this bike is beautiful, and when you turn up somewhere, everyone looks and talks to you about the bike because it is such a beauty. Now, we've just moved location because the spot we chose turned out to be a bit of a tourist attraction, so literally every 2 seconds somebody walked past and sat down behind us, so impossible to film. So here we are in another place, but the lake is still there, still very pretty, and this bike is so comfortable to ride. On a longer journey I found it very comfortable. I love the engine, it's got lots of character, it's an interesting motorcycle to ride, and interesting motorcycles are very enjoyable. So if you're looking for that sort of thing with character, you can absolutely adore this motorcycle.
Now, whilst this bike has got the same 650 twin engine that you see in a lot of the other models, it's different in this bike. It's got a different feel to it. It's calibrated slightly differently for a more gentlemanly, relaxed ride. And the exhaust being different on this bike, you've got a really nice deep tone. It's not loud because it's got to comply with all these regulations, but I'm sure it will be no time until we see lots of aftermarket options with exhausts, which is something I'm very eager to hear, because this engine with the right exhaust is a really, really good sounding engine. And in this country we don't see ever so many of these bikes, Royal Enfields with aftermarket exhaust, but in India, oh my God, they're everywhere and the sound is exquisite. Now, the gearbox on this has got a different feel to it as well. It's been sort of designed to give you more feel, so you feel more connected with the bike. You've got a positive clunkiness going in and out of the gears, and that really heightens your senses when you're riding this motorcycle.
From a practical point of view, these lovely large mudguards front and rear that this bike has means that you don't have to spend a lot of time cleaning it because it keeps all the muck off the bike, and we've been riding it quite a lot and we haven't had the need to clean it yet, so that's fantastic. So if you're the owner of one of these bikes, when you get somewhere you want it to look as pristine as it did when you bought it, and that's the purpose of practical mudguards. We always go on about it, I know, but you all turn up looking nice, where someone with these little ones is going to turn up being caked in filth. Who's going to look better?
Now, one thing that I think some people may be worried about with this bike is that it's a little bit heavy, and on paper it is heavier than the rest of the Royal Enfield lineup, and it does hide its weight very well when you're moving along. When you're riding at any speed, slow speed or high speed, it doesn't feel like a heavy motorcycle, but for us, I mean, we've got a history of riding big bikes. We used to ride Harley Davidsons. The old man's got a BMW R18, which is humongous. So to us, this isn't an extremely heavy bike, but to someone who might be used to a smaller bike, like a Classic 350 or something, you might find this a little bit heavy in comparison. And the only time really that you notice the weight of this bike is when you're sort of pushing it, manoeuvring it, perhaps in your garage or in a small tight space. That's when you start to notice the weight, but it really isn't that heavy. But that is a trade-off of quality parts. Pretty much everything on this is metal, it's solid. It's a really, really high quality motorcycle, and high quality parts way more. It could have gone, right, let's make all the mudguards out of plastic, and let's make plastic switch gear, and let's make this headlamp all out of plastic, but it's all beautiful metal. So if you want a high quality metal stunning motorcycle, then the trade-off is that it's slightly heavier.
Now, this bike would be perfect if you turned up at the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride. If you've heard of that charity ride that's done once a year, people dress up all beautifully smart and go somewhere with a group of people meeting up and ride off somewhere to raise money for prostate cancer awareness. And this would be a very, very classy bike to do that on. And talking about that, we are actually on the Distinguished Gentleman's Ride this year for the first time, which is the one that's starting at Goldtop in Bishop Stortford. So make sure, if you want to join us, that you book your ticket soon.
Over a year ago, the old man had a classic 350 for a few months, and he did a long-term review of that motorcycle. And there was a comment that made us laugh. A chap saying you can't really do a long-term review until you've had the bike for 10 years. So taking his advice on board, make sure you subscribe, and in 10 years time you'll see us do the long-term review of this classic 650. Now there are multiple different colours you can choose from in this bike, and for me the colour of choice would be the teal. It's a stunning classic looking colour, and I did mention this in our comparison between this and the classic 350, which if you haven't watched, go back and watch after you've seen this video. But one of the main reasons I really like that colour is that the frame is also matching colour. So rather than this sort of black ripple paint, which has got a bit of a texture to it, you've got smooth gloss teal paint, the same as you get on the tank and everywhere else. So it just looks ever so classy. And the main thing I like about that is that even with the rear seat still on, because you've got this extra bit of frame, it kind of hides that within the bike, whereas on this, because it's black, it stands out a bit and it makes it look slightly busy with this on. But when you take this off, if perhaps you've not got a pillion, you can take this rear seat off, and then you've got a rack underneath, and you can take the rack off and then you don't have this rear frame bit, it's just the seat. Then it really does look stunning.
Adding to what Darcy just said about colours, when we were in India we saw the new Goan Classic, and it's in some beautiful colours, some really bright lovely colours, and we adored it. And when we spoke to people about that motorbike over here, a lot of them thought it was too bright. So I think in England people don't go for such bright colours, so maybe the teal option here won't be as popular as it will be in India. So if you agree with me, let me know, because if you're Indian, we'd like to know what colour you like the best, and if you're English or British, we'd like to know what colour you like the best, and we'll see if there's a difference. But we think English people are a bit more conservative perhaps, whereas Indian people are quite happy to be out there and show off.
Now, another thing you notice when you ride a bike for a prolonged period of time is how easy it is to reach all the controls, which on this bike is ever so easy. Everything's within arm's reach, all the buttons fall nicely within your hand position. The info switch at the back here is really easy to find, and that can switch through all the different options on the lower screen below the dial. The dial's ever so easy to read, it's beautiful, it's analogue, it's stunning. The only thing this bike doesn't have is a rev counter. Now that would be quite nice to have, and I thought of a little thing they could do to incorporate that, which is if you potentially the little screen below the dial could be also a rev counter if you wanted it to be, or if you weren't using the Tripper pod as your navigation, you could have an option where that could be a digital rev counter, and they could just do a software update which allows it to do that. So I wonder if that's possible. I would love to know if it is, and if you're watching Royal Enfield, let me know if that's possible, because I think that would be a really nice addition to have. Now, I'd be perfectly happy to ride this bike on a long journey. I think it'd be ever so comfortable. Compared to the classic 350, after a short amount of time, after perhaps a whole day's riding, I do get a sore back on that bike because it's a little bit small for me. Whereas this bike has solved that problem, because you feel like you've got a little bit more room in your arms, that you're slightly more a better posture for a taller rider. So if I was doing another really long journey, if I could, I'd choose this over the 350, I think. Now, when you're doing motorway speeds, and when you get into somewhere like France, the motorway speed is 80 miles an hour. And in sixth gear on this bike, at those sorts of speeds, I think perhaps the sixth gear could be a little bit taller, like an eco gear, so that you could cruise along at that sort of speed and it be revving quite low. It's not revving too high, but it's revving a little bit more than you might want to sit at for hours on end at 80 miles an hour or 75 or something like that. So perhaps the sixth gear could be a little bit taller. Now, saying that, this bike is not a bike built for speed, it's for gentlemanly cruising. And if you cruise along at 60 miles an hour, there's no fuss whatsoever. It's at a nice RPM range and it's ever so comfortable to cruise along at that speed. This is a great bike for the country lanes. It's really fun. And it's just gorgeous. Everywhere you park this bike, you will stop and turn around and look at it. And I think that is really, really important for me when it comes to buying a motorcycle. I want to buy a bike that generates passion within me, that I want to turn around and look at and drool over every time I ride it, and this is certainly one of those machines.
Now, as we said at the beginning, we're at Rutland Water. Now, this valley was flooded many, many years ago, and there's a village under the water here called Lower Hambledon, and the Upper Hambledon is above, thankfully for them. And this water is basically a reservoir to serve the city of Peterborough. So all the water here is what you're drinking in your taps in Peterborough. So make sure you don't do anything dirty in that water.
So really, this is a motorcycle for anywhere. Whether you live in England, in America, or in India, or anywhere else, this is a motorcycle that fits in wherever you go, and it turns heads everywhere you go. So the only places really that you might struggle with this bike is if you live in a really rural area in somewhere like India where you've got slightly more sort of unmade roads. Perhaps you'd be better off with something like a Bear 650 or a Classic 350. That's a little bit more rugged than this is. But other than that, this is a really, really good all-round motorcycle. It's got the looks, it's got the character, it's got the classic design. So they really have nailed it with this bike. So hats off to Royal Enfield. They've done it again. They do it time and time again. They're making some fantastic motorcycles and they keep getting better and better. So make sure you subscribe and we'll see you on the next one.